Chapter 11 of Anna Karenina, Book 5, by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. On entering the studio, Mihailov once more scanned his visitors and noted down in his imagination Vronsky's expression too, and especially his jewels. Although his artistic sense was unceasingly at work collecting materials, although he felt a continually increasing excitement as the moment of criticizing his work drew nearer, he rapidly and subtly formed from imperceptible signs a mental image of these three persons. That fellow, Golenishtchev, was a Russian living here. Mihailov did not remember his surname, nor where he had met him, nor what he had said to him. He only remembered his face, as he remembered all the faces he had ever seen. But he remembered too that it was one of the faces laid by in his memory in the immense class of the falsely consequential and poor in expression. The abundant hair and very open forehead gave an appearance of consequence to the face, which had only one expression, a petty, childish, peevish expression, concentrated just above the bridge of the narrow nose. Vronsky and Madame Karenina must be, Mihailov supposed, distinguished and wealthy Russians, knowing nothing about art, like all those wealthy Russians, but posing as amateurs and connoisseurs. Most likely they've already looked at all the antiques, and now they're making the round of the studios of the new people, the German humbug and the cracked pre-Raphaelite English fellow, and have only come to me to make the point of view complete, he thought. He was well acquainted with the way dilettanti have. The cleverer they were, the worse he found them. Of looking at the works of contemporary artists with the sole object of being in a position to say that art is a thing of the past, and that the more one sees of the new men, the more one sees how inimitable the works of the great old masters have remained. He expected all this. He saw it all in their faces. He saw it in the careless indifference with which they talked among themselves, stared at the lay figures and busts, and walked about in leisurely fashion, waiting for him to uncover his picture. But in spite of this, while he was turning over his studies, pulling up the blinds and taking off the sheet, he was in intense excitement, especially as, in spite of his conviction that all distinguished and wealthy Russians were certain to be beasts and fools, he liked Vronsky, and still more Anna. "Here, if you please," he said, moving on one side with his nimble gait and pointing to his picture. "It's the exhortation to Pilate, Matthew, chapter 27, he said, feeling his lips were beginning to tremble with emotion. He moved away and stood behind them. For the few seconds during which the visitors were gazing at the picture in silence, Mihailov too gazed at it with the indifferent eye of an outsider. For those few seconds he was sure in anticipation that a higher, juster criticism would be uttered by them, by those very visitors whom he had been so despising a moment before. He forgot all he had thought about his picture before during the 3 years he had been painting it. He forgot all its qualities, which had been absolutely certain to him. He saw the picture with their indifferent, new, outside eyes, and saw nothing good in it. he saw in the foreground Pilate's irritated face and the serene face of Christ, and in the background the figures of Pilate's retinue and the face of John watching what was happening. Every face that, with such agony, such blunders and corrections, had grown up within him with its special character, every face that had given him such torments and such raptures, and all these faces so many times transposed for the sake of the harmony of the whole, all the shades of color and tones that he had attained with such labor, all of this together seemed to him now, looking at it with their eyes, the merest vulgarity, something that had been done 1,000 times over. The face dearest to him, the face of Christ, the center of the picture, which had given him such ecstasy as it unfolded itself to him, was utterly lost to him when he glanced at the picture with their eyes. He saw a well-painted, no, not even that, he distinctly saw now a mass of defects, repetition of those endless Christs of Titian, Raphael, Rubens, and the same soldiers and Pilate. It was all common, poor and stale, and positively badly painted, weak and unequal. They would be justified in repeating hypocritically civil speeches in the presence of the painter, and pitying him and laughing at him when they were alone again. The silence, though it lasted no more than a minute, became too intolerable to him. To break it, and to show he was not agitated, he made an effort and addressed Golenishtchev. "I think I've had the pleasure of meeting you," he said, looking uneasily first at Anna, then at Vronsky, in fear of losing any shade of their expression. "To be sure, we met at Rossi's, do you remember, at that soirée, when that Italian lady recited, 'The new Rachel'?" Golenishtchev answered easily, removing his eyes without the slightest regret from the picture, and turning to the artist. Noticing, however, that Mihailov was expecting a criticism of the picture, he said, "Your picture has got on a great deal since I saw it last time. And what strikes me particularly now, as it did then, is the figure of Pilate. One so knows the man, a good-natured, capital fellow, but an official through and through, who does not know what it is he's doing. But I fancy...." All Mihailov's mobile face beamed at once. His eyes sparkled. He tried to say something, but he could not speak for excitement, and pretended to be coughing. Low as was his opinion of Golenishtchev's capacity for understanding art, trifling as was the true remark upon the fidelity of the expression of Pilate as an official, and offensive as might have seemed the utterance of so unimportant an observation, while nothing was said of more serious points, Mihailov was in an ecstasy of delight at this observation. He had himself thought about Pilate's figure just what Golenishtchev said. The fact that this reflection was but one of millions of reflections, which as Mihailov knew for certain would be true, did not diminish for him the significance of Golenishtchev's remark. His heart warmed to Golenishtchev for this remark, and from a state of depression he suddenly passed to ecstasy. At once the whole of his picture lived before him in all the indescribable complexity of everything living. Mihailov again tried to say that that was how he understood Pilate, but his lips quivered intractably, and he could not pronounce the words. Vronsky and Anna too said something in that subdued voice in which, partly to avoid hurting